do anything with this, correct? It's on?
It's on.
Okay.
Just go forward.
All right, perfect. That's easy, I can handle that. That's amazing. So Ani Buju, that's a greeting in Anishinaabemowin, which is the language of my Ojibwe people. My name, as mentioned, is Jenn Harper. I'm the founder and CEO of a brand called Cheekbone Beauty Cosmetics. And what I'm here to do today is to tell you and share with you the story of the journey of how this little Ojibwe girl built a company from a corner in her basement starting with $500 and now will be available in 50 Sephora locations across Canada and 600 JCPenney locations across the United States. Thank you. Yeah, I need you all in my office every single day doing that chair. I feel like that's a great way to start the workday for sure. It sounds so fast and easy and quick and like everything happens. I still call us a startup, but the original mission and vision of our brand has never changed. The reason why we exist has been the same since we started this business, and that's helping every Indigenous person on the planet see and feel their value in the world while we craft sustainable color cosmetics for every human being that don't end up in a landfill. And that was the foundation of who we are and why we started. When I was a young girl, I don't ever remember seeing myself represented by a beauty brand, never mind by any sort of mainstream media or marketing. And what I love about women, if we don't see something in the world, we just decide one day we're gonna create it and build it ourselves. And so that's what Cheekbone Beauty set out to do. But the path to getting to where we are today and to the woman that I am today was not an easy task, let me tell you. And I know so many of us come from so many different communities and cultures, and we all have our history. And mine started with my grandmother. Understanding my grandmother's experience really helped me discover who I was and where I came from, which was really a painful process. I have to be honest with everyone, and I'm really open in sharing my story, but I do talk about addiction and suicide in my presentation, so if anyone is uncomfortable, please, if you have to leave the room, I take no offense to that. So this is a picture of my grandmother, Emily Paul, and this is her as a teen at St. Mary's Residential School just outside of Kenora. I had no idea what those words meant until I was 38 years old. I was 38 when I learned what residential school and what it meant for my family and my communities. And I learned this term called generational or transgenerational trauma, when a group of people are faced with an event or a situation that they are not equipped to deal with. And learned that that was passed on not only to my father, my aunties, and my uncles, but ultimately passed on to me and my siblings, and affects every First Nation family in this country in North America to this day. And how this all came out for me was I had my own struggle. I had my own battle. I was battling alcoholism for many, many years. In 2010, I entered rehab. I had done rehab again, and of course relapsed until, very proud day, November 26, 2014 is the last day I ever drank alcohol. And thank you. Not that alcohol is bad for everyone, I always will say that. It is wonderfully and enjoyed in moderation, that is for sure. Our province and our country, there's several amazing businesses built on alcohol, so I never want to vilify anything. But for me, alcohol was bad. And this all played out and panned out when I learned that, I wasn't the only person with this struggle. And I think what took me so long to get well was the shame and the stereotypical drunk Native person we see that's living on the streets of Toronto, for instance, and I never wanted to be that person. And so me actually admitting I had a problem was such a painful experience, but when I did, and when I finally got well, my life has changed dramatically and so much for the better. And for my family, in the early days of starting this brand, understanding the power of changing a narrative and what we can do to support our families and our communities when we set out to do that is a really, really powerful story we can tell, and a powerful decision that we all have the ability to make for not only our own families, but for our communities. So, very tragically, one of the things I learned about generational trauma was not only is substance abuse, violence part of the generational trauma, suicide is one of the one of the terrible side effects, and this is a picture of me and my brother BJ. And in 2016, he took his own life in September when I had just been on the verge of launching the brand. Like, how dare him? I'm only kidding. I say that to be light. But I remember back in those days, I was sharing so much about this business and this idea with him of what we could build. Can you imagine we could create this brand and that we could use portions of the profits to support our community? And he was so on board. He was so excited to share with me what he knew about growing up on the res with our family. I grew up in St. Catharines with my mother, who's not Indigenous, but my brother grew up with my other siblings and my father and my stepmother on our First Nation community, which is in northwestern Ontario. And so I would be learning so much from him. And that night when my dad called, and for a week after, I was literally in the fetal position in my closet, but I had to get up. I knew that this idea, this concept for building this kind of business about giving back and making a social impact, that it had to exist. And literally, quite honestly, BJ has been the driving force behind the success of Cheekbone Beauty. So for 3 years, I was working my full-time job selling seafood, and I would build and work on cheekbones at night and on the weekend. And truly unsustainable, and never recommend this to anyone, but working like 80 to 100-hour work weeks for this idea and for this belief and to see this brand come to fruition. So I honestly, I thank my brother for his knowledge, for his teachings about our community and about our people, and I thank him for giving me the drive and the passion, and that I know his life will not be in vain. Thank you. Decide to enter the beauty industry. Like, that is a crazy, crazy thing when I think about it. So November 26th, remember, that's the day I got sober. 2 months later, I have the most incredible, life-changing dream. And in the dream, this is all I remember from it, are these 3 native little girls covered in lip gloss. And I woke up that night, and it's 2 a.m., and I grabbed my laptop, and I literally started writing the foundation of what Cheekbone Beauty is today. And it's about creating a product and using a portion of those profits to support our community. And that's what we get to do. And spent 2015 and 2016 learning about my Indigenous history and learning about my Indigenous culture and learning about many more Indigenous histories and cultures around the world in that year. And also then started listening to every podcast about business. I read over 100 books in those 2 years, and on entrepreneurship, how to build a business, marketing strategy, financial strategies, all the strategies that could be possible in order for me to build the brand, because I didn't have an education in business. I was only ever working for people. I don't have entrepreneurs in my family that I was close to or understood their life or their world. And so I just became this sponge over those first few years. And then slowly within our Indigenous community, people started hearing about our brands, because we did it the way that any sort of e-com business does it now. You build a store on Shopify, you load up a couple pictures of products, and then people can start coming and buying them. And I remember that day when we launched. It was November 26, 2016. And of course, I picked that day on purpose when we launched the online store. And it's really interesting when you launch an online store, you're like, okay, I've done like 2 years of work, right? Like, I've done everything. And like, nobody's coming to the store. It was like my mother and my aunties were the ones buying the stuff. However, that's when I learned how important marketing is, and that understanding marketing and having an extremely well thought out and planned marketing strategy, which also does include just being your authentic self. And it absolutely includes showing your passion and being vulnerable to the rest of the world. Because sometimes I wonder, how did Cheekbone Beauty end up in Sephora when there's so many other brands out there that never even hit the boardroom to have a conversation with the leadership team at Sephora? And I honestly believe to this day, it's that insane passion and hard work that I had in the early days, and about making this brand want to come into the world for reasons so much more powerful than making money. And this is truly the truth, that if we're doing these things just to make money, they're never going to work. So we need to have so much more about our businesses and our organizations. And if we're working for organizations, Anybody in leadership here needs to know why right now. You will continue to lose people. The studies, the data is showing people are leaving jobs. You need to give people a reason why they work for you and give them a purpose. The human race needs this at this moment in history. And so if you're on a leadership team, do whatever you can to have people like me come and speak to your companies, but also have people and create plans and systems for them to succeed and that they want to stay with you, because I know this is a struggle for so many of us in organizations right now. And so this picture is up because this is a moment when everything changed for the brand. I was on season 14, episode 1 of the CBC hit series Dragon's Den. And in the backstory of this year and before this episode, and if you've ever seen the show or understand or not have talked to anyone, you're in the studio with these producers and those 6 dragons for like an hour. The taping is like an hour long, if not a little bit longer. And then they edit it down to like 7 minutes. So if you've seen the episode, full disclosure, that's not how everything goes down or how it happens. This is definitely for TV and definitely probably the most incredible marketing experience I've ever lived through when you see and plan and prepare for it. So we knew this was happening, and also, truth be told, I had a term sheet from another investor in my back pocket while I was in the audition for Dragon's Den. So I knew I was able to turn those guys down with it was a terrible deal anyway. If you've seen the episode, they wanted like 50% of the company for $125,000. And Michelle and Arlene at the time were like, you're too soon, and they're not wrong. And those are things as entrepreneurs, you have no idea what being too soon in terms of giving up the equity of your company means until you're in that situation. But it was an incredible experience. I got to flex and that courage muscle, like never in a million years would I ever envision. If you talked to me 10 years ago when I was still battling and fighting to survive, that I would be on a stage talking to people, one, about recovery and this journey, and then going in front of a panel of judges to talk about a brand or pitch a brand or a business. And so that's the first time that I actually publicly pitched Cheekbone Beauty to a group of people. But it was an incredible learning experience and took the opportunity, like this is where in life, like just taking those opportunities wherever we can. And if you have a moment with someone, like just have the courage and start to practice the courage just to talk about you and your business and what you're doing. And then I always say, never forget to ask other people about them and what they're doing, because it's not always all about us. But it's really important to practice, and so many incredible things have happened since then. I've never loved networking or showing up at events like this. This was like the hardest thing in the early days of building the brand. I have to tell you, I would find myself hiding in bathroom stalls, no joke, for like 20 minutes, like preparing myself mentally to go out and talk to people and figure out who's gonna help me. Because remember, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I still admit that to this day, and I think that's really important for all of us to understand. I had the incredible experience of meeting a woman named Rachel Milkey, who founded a brand in Canada called Hilberg & Burke, and they're sparkly jewelry. They're in the west of the country. They're just starting, I believe, to open stores in Ontario. And we were at the Women of Influence event, and you know, at that event, they're talking about these people's businesses. And I went to that event all by myself, bought a ticket, just sat there to listen and see what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What are all these people doing? And I had the courage just to go up and ask her. I'm like, okay, they just said her business did 75 million last year. Like, that means she knows what's going on and that she is successful. But something inside of me said, go ask her this question. And I walked up to her and I said, Rachel, hi, my name's Jenn. I'm a big fan of your brand. Can I ask you a crazy question? She said, sure. I said, do you ever feel like you don't know what you're doing? And she looked me like dead in the eyes and said, every single day. And for some reason, that's like the validation we as women need. And I was like, okay, this is awesome. She just did 75 million in annual sales, and she doesn't know what she's doing. And I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and that is okay. And I think I'm a mom of teens, early adults, young adults, and I just think that's so important that we reframe this for our families, for our communities, that it's okay not to know what we're doing, because there is somebody out here that knows something that you need to know, and that's why it's so important to show up at events like this and start to meet the right people. So, excuse me, I ripped all over myself. This is the beginning of how we started the brand, and I think this is an important part of our brand story because I had no money, remember, $500, and now we have this incredible sustainable beauty brand. But in the early days, I was using what is called white label or private label, and it's manufacturers that literally will like slap your logo on their products, but you have no control over how things are made. And so I was selling fish, remember, know nothing about the beauty industry. So now I'm entering an industry so naive, like so naive, it's unbelievable. Like I just shared this with a group of friends that in those early days, I can't believe none of my friends and family were like, what does Jenn think she's doing? Or even talked to me and said, you are in sales and marketing in the food world. That's what you've always done. Like, what do you think? Like, why are you starting a brand, like a beauty brand? You know nothing about this industry. But I relate this to, like, I think timing in life and circumstance and all those things are really, really interesting because you have to remember I was newly sober. So I'm not drinking, but I'm building this pretend cosmetics company, right? So, and I think that's what they thought. And they're like, okay, she's not like, let's just keep working on this project. And sometimes in those early days, that's when people can sort of kill the magic of this wonderful, beautiful dream or concept or idea that you have. And so I do encourage people never to share it too early. I think I just got really lucky because of my situation that nobody kiboshed this idea. So I'm now in this industry and I'm buying these products and we're selling them from our little Shopify store. And the sales are like, first year from that corner of my basement, like $150,000. Second year was like $275,000. Third year, we hit over $1 million in the third year. And so this is all with these products. And the more I would ask people from these organizations that were selling them to us about the ingredients, the packaging, what can be done differently, crickets, and nobody shares any kinds of information. They were like, I'm on lockdown. And this is when I realized that this is complete BS. I learned something about the beauty industry and probably any other industries that if sometimes things are bulked and made in countries around the world, but then filled here, and one ingredient is added here, then they can say it's made in Canada, and you have no idea what's happening somewhere around the world. That there's ingredients that people are using that they quite possibly shouldn't be using. There's ingredients that are completely unsustainable that will never biodegrade, which are like things like microplastics, silicones, and those things stay in our aquatic systems, ecosystems forever. I was learning that the packaging, even though it's plastic, because we've all been fed this nonsense BS lie about recycling is. Recycling is a business, it's a waste management business, and only 5%, the data and science shows that only 5% of the items that hit our blue bins now actually get recycled. And if it's black plastic, it is never going anywhere but the landfill. So I came up with this incredible idea that I could then figure out how to make more sustainable products that were safer for people and the planet. Again, no experience in this industry, but I thought, of course, this is possible. We can figure that out. And we did. I'm really, really grateful. Cheekbone Beauty has been the recipient of hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants from organizations like IRAP, which are about innovation. A lot of our company spends a lot of time on research and development and in creating new products. We're working on this insane, incredible project right now because we're in the Niagara region where we're taking waste from our fruit agricultural and extracting active ingredients that will be used in future beauty products. And we think about everything using this concept called what is called two-eyed seeing. And two-eyed seeing is a concept coined by Dr. Albert Marshall, a Mi'kmaq elder from the east coast of Canada. And this is an idea where we're marrying indigenous wisdom and Western science to make and create products. And so at Cheekbone Beauty, we use life cycle thinking or life cycle analysis. And that's from the harvesting of the raw ingredients to the end of the life of the product, which includes the packaging, which we often forget about, and hoping things along this way. And how we've worked is we work backwards. We're like, okay, we don't want this to end up in a landfill. We want to use items that are biodegradable. So how do we work backwards in order to make that happen? Definitely not an easy task, not for the faint of heart, and not for someone who's not science-minded. I actually failed grade 9 science. Now I employ scientists, I sign their paychecks, and we built a lab at Cheekbone Beauty, which for an indie brand is very, very, very uncommon. So I'm so, so proud of the fact that we actually have a scientist that helps with formulations and works with our partners around the world so that we can now be as authentic and transparent as possible and share exactly where all of the ingredients of the packaging in our products come from. And this is the brand that was born. This is the first picture that helped us launch when we launched in Sephora Canada in September of 2021. And I always save this picture because we'd never spent this much money on photography ever before, but this was a $2,500 photograph, everyone. If you want to know what a $2,500 picture looks like, that is it, by a product photographer out of Toronto. This is really important to me as the founder and as an Indigenous woman. We have all been sort of led to believe that there's this idea of what it means to be Indigenous and what an Indigenous person looks like, and yet we in fact have no idea, right? We have this Hollywood version, this made-up version that's usually someone in regalia, and that's what it means to be Indigenous, or that's what an Indigenous person is. The planet has 370 million Indigenous people. They come from all continents and all kinds of communities. And the reality is, the truth is, what we share is this story of colonization. And unfortunately, many of our communities have been impacted in a negative way, which usually not only means for our people, but for the planet, by colonization. And that all, the love of land and greed and all of those wonderful things. But the purpose of this picture is to show that we have no idea what it means to be Indigenous technically, or what it looks like, and that our job now, as the first Indigenous brand ever to be available in a Sephora, is to help make sure that the story of what it means to be Indigenous and what it looks like to be Indigenous is kind of unknown. We're never going to be sure. What sets us apart? So many incredible things. Not only our lab and the science and innovation behind the projects that we're working on, our concepts. We weave Indigenous wisdom into every aspect of our business and company. And so all the reason why we do all things, not only is it amazing, but what we're talking a lot about today is marketing. And this is what we get to share with our community. This is what you have to have an extremely incredible, powerful differentiating factor when you're building a company, and having Indigenous wisdom as the foundation of our brand is truly one of the things that sets us apart, and that's something we're really proud of. Our naming conventions. So the Sustained Bullet lipstick was the first lipstick that we launched at Cheekbone Beauty, and it was really interesting because it took forever. I remember those early meetings with Sephora, and they rejected us from their accelerator program, and I was again crying in my closet. And then I came out and I stayed in contact with this incredible woman named Jane Nugent, who's their VP of merchandising to this day. And I just kept sending her samples of once we left the white private label world, I knew we were okay, I had to work on making this lipstick. And I knew nothing about making lipsticks. And so I kept sending her samples, and it was a couple years. And finally, 18 months into this, she said, yeah, this is the lipstick. This is the one we want at Sephora, which was great news. And then we set on this journey of how we were going to name them. And so because it was our first product in the Sustain line, we called it Sustain Lipstick, and then we named every lipstick after the word for land from a different Indigenous community. So Aki, which is the most incredible red lipstick, is the word for land or earth in my language, Anishinaabe-Moan. And then of course we have all of the other languages. One of my favorites is Ahor, which is from the Tongva people of modern day Los Angeles. And so when we're thinking about all of these details, the 90s brown was big in LA during those times. And so we're really trying to modernize who we are as a people, but also make it relevant to the beauty industry at the same time. And it's been an incredible learning experience, because you don't realize how important naming is for your brand or for products, but it is such an important process to understand and figure out how that can help you then connect to your customer and your community and make them want to come back and keep buying, not only because you have a great product, but because there's a great story. So not only does your brand have to have a story, not only do you have to have a story as a human and as an individual, but every product that you're putting out in the world has to have a story behind it as well. And then the thing that sets us apart, that took us thousands of man hours and teams of working together, was the fact that, We became a B Corp certified company this past April of last year, which we'll celebrate a year as a B Corp, which was a huge, huge task. There's so many like certifications I've learned that we could put on our packaging, and all I had to do to these organizations was write a check and they would let us use their logo. Not B Corp, you have to spend these thousands of hours with their teams as they're vetting not only your organization, but your supply chain. We pay everybody a living wage at Cheekbone Beauty. We make sure the partners that we work with around the world are paying their teams properly. And then we also understand and are completely transparent about the supply chain with our B Corp community. And what this did was, even though I think it's an incredible task, if you have the time or energy, it's a lot of work, but it's what we call receipts to prove. There's so much greenwashing that happens. There's so much baloney that we're fed as consumers. Marketers love them and hate them all at the same time. I am one, but they want to give us one word, like clean beauty. Does anyone actually know what that means? Well, no, because there's no actual meaning for it. It's a marketing term. There's no regulatory or compliant body defining what clean beauty is in the world right now, to the point where actually Sephora is being sued by somebody for using it. But what this will help do, and what we're seeing right now in the United States, there's new policy coming down where they're going to get a lot more stringent. And of course, this is where we need government to help us create better policies so that we know the products that we're putting on ourselves as Canadians or as North Americans, that these are healthy, good for us and the planet products. But that doesn't exist. And what happened is with the internet and e-commerce is, I think it's truly become the Wild West in terms of what's being sold. You can't have a product made in someone's kitchen and not be safe. That is just absolutely not safe. And you know, there's stability testing. For a product to actually come into the world safely, that is a 2-year process. And we actually have to sit and watch it. Like, this is not a joke. We make something and we have to watch it for a whole year. And that mimics shelf life in whatever store it goes into in the future. And because we're using more naturally derived ingredients, you can imagine how much harder this is. So it's truly important that the consumer starts to understand where they have the power. And so when I'm thinking about products that we're putting into the world or the things that we're purchasing, you have to understand, I love saying this, that cheap is a race to the bottom. If you want that $7 lipstick, do not kid yourself. There is a human being that is being impacted by that lipstick, that is not being paid a fair wage, and that the planet is suffering because you're buying cheap crap, and that's all there is to it. And you have to be real with yourself. And then, trust me, I completely understand that we live in a world where things cost, inflation, all of these things are truly expensive, but we also have a problem as a society. We don't need 20 lipsticks, we might need 1, maybe 2, right? Like, I think we have an issue when we're buying 17 or making these, what they call like hauls from Sephora or Ulta. Like, we need less stuff if we actually want this planet to exist much longer than it's going to if we keep going at the rate we are. And that's what sets us apart, because we are so passionate. And what B Corp actually means is that we now have a legal obligation to both people and the planet before profits. And what we have the luxury of doing is we don't have stakeholders to answer to at Cheekbone Beauty. That if I am building a healthy company where people are getting paid a fair wage, I don't have to make enough profits to stuff stakeholder pockets. And that's what makes our business, I believe, the most incredible beauty company that's available at Sephora. Thank you. So more about marketing, because I could rant about sustainability issues forever. So this was an incredible opportunity. I'm always about look for the opportunity, find the thing that's gonna help you get to the next step. We met and we're seeking a new marketing agency to help us with digital ads. And I've left Madeline in this picture because she's really to blame for this whole thing. She no longer works for us. I think she went to work for Kia, a car company, as a marketing creator. But we were looking for support with digital ads, because I don't know about you, but I do not understand how those things work or what's going to make them work better and how much to spend and it's an extremely convoluted conversation that I believe the marketing agency world wants us to be convoluted, so they know we need to pay them, but anyway, that's a whole nother topic. We set out to find some. Madeline shows up at the meeting, so I sent everyone on the team, I'm like, go find an agency, and everyone bring them and we'll meet with them and we're gonna decide who we're gonna work with. She shows up She shows up at this meeting with Sid Lee. Now, at the time, I could say that, and I had no idea who they were or what they did. Lo and behold, they're not really a marketing agency. And I have to tell you, Madeline is an OCAD student, so she's like from the creative art world, and they're a different crowd, right, Courtney? She's a creative too, I'm just kidding. So she's an OCAD grad and had met Sid Lee from some program she did at school. And so she shows up to this meeting with Sid Lee, and Sid Lee is presenting to us, and then I'm in the meeting because this is Zoom world still, and I'm like, Sid Lee, like, who are they? I'm like, oh my God, oh my goodness. They are the creatives behind We the North for the Toronto freaking Raptors. And right away I was like, we can't afford these people. Like, what are you doing? Why am I talking to this organization right now? So anyway, I tell the brand story. We end the meeting, and I said to them, I'm like, look, it was so great to meet you. Like, I love the work you've done. It's just, we can't afford you. There's no way we can afford you. They're like, oh, no, you don't get it. Like, we get to do pro bono work every year and pick a company that we want to work with. And we've picked Cheekbone Beauty. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, and it's only going to cost you $75,000. And I'm like, because we're going to cover like the $350K. And I'm like, that's great, but I don't have $75,000 like cash flow. If any, we're operators, cash flow, you live and die by that spreadsheet. We don't have that. So anyway, conversation, we get the 75 down to eventually something else, but they came back to us 3 weeks later. They were gonna do all this work for us for about over a year and a half, and they brought it down to 50K. I'm talking to our CFO, I'm like, can we spread this out? How can we pay them? Can we make this work? Because I believe that we need our brand to be leveled up to go into Sephora, and we weren't there yet. And so we agreed, we made it happen. And then 3 weeks later, they come back and they're like, okay, we have this other incredible idea. And I'm like, great, what is it? And they're like, we're going to apply to win this competition called the Idea Competition from Bell Media, Canada's largest media company. And what Cheekbone Beauty will win is $1 million in ad spend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy, this is wild, this is so exciting. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And they're like, and they said, capacity for Cheekbone is thin and tight. Your team does nothing. We're coming up with all these creative pitches for you, and we'll pitch you the idea for this campaign, and you don't have to do anything. And I was like, okay, absolutely, perfect. You guys do that. So they come back. They have 3 campaigns. We pick the Write the Story one. If you've not seen it, please YouTube Cheekbone Beauty Write the Story. It is 90 seconds of the most beautiful commercial. I'll cry when I think about it. It's so beautiful. With a poem written by Zoe Roy, who's an Indigenous poet, and just the work that they put into this, it was so magical. I'm crying because there's more money that was being spent. I'm like, how am I going to pay for that? So they come back and they're like, okay, we're covering everything again. Sid Lee again. They're just throwing pro bono work out there like it's nobody's business. And they're like, but the hard cost for the commercial that's going to Q4, best year in CPG businesses, like best time of year, right? November, December, you want that, is about $150,000. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys do not get it. Like, we have no money at all. Like, where am I getting this $150,000? And I'm like, got off the call, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go ask Sephora. Like, Sephora's gotta have some money kicking around, of course, right? Like, I'm gonna ask Sephora, I'm gonna tell them, and I'm like, this is huge. I'm like, sitting there, this is a conversation in my own head, like, it's $1 million in ad spend, like, that's for them. If we put their logo on it, like, it's beneficial. So anyway, had the conversation. 5 days later, lo and behold, Sephora gave the $150K. And this commercial was shot, and 98% of crew, cast, food service, makeup, Indigenous people in the Yukon. The business that did the catering came back to us and said, you saved our company, because this is a pandemic. Your fee for feeding these people for 3 days, like, let their company go on for like another few months, and of course until business picked up. And Shawno is the director, and his wife run this organization called TSU North, and they do commercials for like Jeep, and he's Indigenous, he's Métis, and they just did such a beautiful job with this project, and it's something that I'm so proud of, because it was all about, every media story for my entire life has been negative about my people. And we wanted to be the ones to help change that narrative. And I know that this this whole project was so powerful. I remember driving down the Gardner Expressway and seeing the billboard for the first time with my husband and my kids in the car and screaming, and then getting messages, I'm telling you, from hundreds of people from across this country, and like probably crying like I am right now about just, and seeing the commercial on TV and seeing people taking videos of it and what this means. Like, this doesn't happen in our communities. Like, this is so rare for something this big to happen, and we would have never been able to afford something like that on our own. And so to have the support of Canadian organizations means so much to not just our brand that's little, but it means so much to the people. And that's why marketing matters. Like, people need to feel seen, they need to feel represented, and whatever projects we're working on or doing, like, think about that on such a deep level. Like, who are you doing this for? Who are you trying to connect with? And this is so emotional. It has to be. This is how we're going to connect with each other, and this is how we're going to make our world better, when we connect on such a deeper level. And in last year, there's so many incredible things that have happened to this brand. Like, I still cannot believe this. Like, yeah, if I stop and think about it, I'm like, what? You like own a cosmetics brand still? It's crazy to me. So the Canadian Business Magazine puts out like their list of top 10 innovators in 2022, and Shopify is number 1, and we were number 4, which blew my mind because of the innovation projects I was sharing with you that we're working on. It's just, you never know what can happen when you start to share what you're doing in your world, all of the good stories, like, and just so many beautiful, incredible things can happen. And then, the end of last year, me and J-Lo, we hung out for the first time. Yeah, this is crazy. This is another situation where you just don't know what can happen, but our PR agency calls, and the Sidley PR agency, and said there's this incredible opportunity. The entrepreneur puts out this list of 100 of women of influence, and we think Jen would be great. And they submit, and you don't know what's going to happen until it actually happens. But it was like in print, which is so rare because everything's digital. And I remember being at an Indigenous women event in November with a whole bunch of incredible Indigenous women founders that have started so many other businesses. And we're all sitting there, and I had the article for the first time and got to share that, like the moment you just gave me when I come up here, and got to share that with them, that this happened. Because again, this is, I've said this from the beginning, this is never about me, even though that's my name on the list. This is for every Indigenous person. Everything that we're doing at Cheekbone Beauty, if I never had to be the face of the brand, trust me, I would not. I'd love to be behind the scenes, never being in public. But I remember one of the early marketing agencies we were working with, they're like, no, Jen, you have to tell the story. You have to get out there and do that. And it's something I never want to be doing, but I'm realizing not only like all the things, I'm sharing sobriety, that's okay, and your life can change from those things, and all those things that make us so uncomfortable. The moment we start to share them, we grow, not only as entrepreneurs and business owners, but we grow as people, and you can see yourself change, and it's really, really powerful. And I've, this will be my last, I'm going on forever, sorry. This will be my last story that I share with you. It's the most incredible thing that happened last year. I've said this from the beginning of the brand, and I had, I'm saying it over and over again, how much representation matters, but I really didn't know until this moment. And thankfully I had Courtney, my other sidekick, there with me to take a picture of this, because normally I'm at these Sephora events all by myself and no one to take a photo, but she happened to be there with me. This was in Toronto at the Eaton Centre. So another incredible campaign in June, which I'm getting to share with you publicly for the first time. It was called #GlossedOver. And if you saw this campaign, it was something that scared the crap out of me when the Sidley brought it to us. And I'm like, this is crazy, you guys are nuts, we can't do that. So they bring this idea where you're going to do this like PR box, and inside the box are these lip glosses, and they're called Luscious Lead and Mercury Shimmer and E. coli Kisses. And I'm like, and we're gonna try to, I'm like, we're taking these to Sephora and we're gonna try to sell these lipsticks. And they're like, no, they're not. Well, actually they did really want us to, remember, to make the contaminated ones. We're like, we really cannot make contaminated lip glosses and bring them anywhere. But it's what they call like a shock and awe marketing campaign. And we won 2 beauty awards for it by US-based beauty agencies, the Beauty Independent and Beauty Matter, for the best marketing campaign in 2022. And I got to fly to LA and accept those awards, which was really cool. And that campaign had me visiting all 15 of the Sephora locations that we were in at the time. And this was at the Eaton Center. And so in my grade 6 year, I lived with my dad in native public housing. It's called Gabrielle Dumont in Scarborough, and so we're like dirt poor. And I remember always when I was visiting him and when we were living there, I'd always, just for fun, want to go to the Eaton Center. I have no idea why. It's probably like shopping women. We just love those things, I guess. I don't know, stereotypical. And he would take me to the Eaton Center, and I would just be in awe of stores. And then this morning, I walk into the Eaton Center, and Sephora Canada has paid for a billboard like the size of the top of the Eaton Center, you know, when you're in the middle and you can see straight up, and it said, Cheekbone Beauty, now available at Sephora Canada. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like, and I was sitting there going, like, it was wild because I couldn't believe that something like that was actually happening. And remembering as a little girl being in the Eaton Center and being like, possibly accused of stealing with my dad, or him arguing with a store or shopkeeper about our status card. So never do you think as a kid that you would be in a different position, right? And so then later on this evening, man, I cry a lot. I cry and laugh a lot, so I think it's a balance, like it's a mix, right? So later that evening, Courtney and I are there, and we're doing like blush application, and we did these at all the Sephoras. And then this little Anishinaabe girl shows up with her mom and her brother and her auntie, and they're like laughing, and she's 12 or 13, but she had so much confidence that I remember not having at her age, right? And she was talking about her TikTok account and how she's famous and had to shut it down, and her brother's like, no, you're not. And they were just arguing, and it was the cutest thing ever. And then I'm driving home back to St. Catharines that night, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what it is. This is why representation matters. Because that little girl and her little brother will never question or wonder what they're gonna build or do, because they just met a woman that looks like them, that's already built something, and that's why representation matters. Thank you.